And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Even more headlines, these emanating out of Capitol Hill. This is what we know. The House Oversight Committee subpoenaed the Department of Justice today for files in the sex trafficking investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. It's part of a congressional probe that lawmakers believe may show links to President Trump and other former top officials. The Republican-controlled committee also issuing subpoenas for depositions with former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State and First Lady Hillary Clinton, and 8 former top law enforcement officials. Fox News Capitol Hill correspondent Aisha Hasni with more details.
Tonight, former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are facing congressional subpoenas to testify in person about Jeffrey Epstein. The House Oversight Committee summoning the Clintons and 8 former FBI directors and attorneys general spanning from the Bush era to the Biden White House. The historic move comes as pressure grows on Republicans and the Trump administration to release the Epstein files, and as President Trump points his finger away from himself.
By the way, I never went to the island, and Bill Clinton went there supposedly 28 times.
Clinton has denied that, but Oversight Chairman James Comer tells Fox he's got questions.
Well, were you ever at Epstein Island? How many times did you go to Epstein Island? What was your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
No former president has ever come to the Hill for a deposition, but Comer says the Clintons will have a hard time dodging this one since the left wants answers too. Last week, 4 Democrats on an oversight panel voted with 3 Republicans to subpoena the Justice Department for the Epstein files. Democrats are looking for one name.
Donald Trump is clearly going to do everything that he can to minimize the impact to him, but yet he's involved in the cover-up, and we believe Republicans are helping in that right now.
That investigation gets underway as another pushes ahead.
Mr. Reed, did you think that the president was competent to serve?
Former Biden Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Bruce Reed sitting in for his closed-door interview today over the alleged cover-up of President Biden's decline. Reed was part of a small group of decision-makers who hid Biden, according to the book Original Sin. Advisors who have all, so far, defended Biden's competency to be the commander-in-chief.
And a source familiar with Reed's deposition tells Fox News that he defended the former president and blamed his poor debate performance on his stutter, said that his White House physician, Dr. Kevin O'Connor, dismissed any cognitive tests as meaningless. On Capitol Hill, I'm Aisha Hasni, Fox News.
Aisha, thanks so much here. All right, let's bring into the conversation some friends of the program here. Legal analyst, former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani, and reporter there at the Washington Examiner who covers all things at the Department of Justice, Kaylin Deese. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with me. I'm going to start with you, though, Nima, first. The point of a subpoena is to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, to eventually possibly refer that very testimony in that deposition criminally to the Department of Justice. But in this case, James Comer is issuing these subpoenas to the Department of Justice and others for the Epstein files here. Help us make sense of what's going on. What's the play Comer is making?
Andrew, subpoenas are sent usually for legal reasons, but here it's entirely political. First, there's absolutely no chance that former President Bill Clinton walks into the Capitol building and gives testimony. That's just not going to happen. It's a separation of powers issue. He's going to invoke the executive privilege. Now, with respect to the Epstein files themselves, really up to Pam Bondi. She's made certain promises to the American people. She can certainly unilaterally disclose that information, but she doesn't have to. She can invoke an executive privilege, but she also has other privileges as well, including the deliberative process privilege and the law enforcement privilege. And ultimately, if any of these parties refuse to comply with the subpoena, of course, it's the Department of Justice that has to pursue contempt charges. Now, the House can file a civil contempt lawsuit, but that's unlikely to go anywhere anytime soon. So there's really not much teeth when it comes to these subpoenas. It's more political theater than anything.
You know, Kaylin, I want to put these names up, and to Aisha Hasni's point, I mean, they literally span back to the Bush era. here, these DOJ officials, you see there, these are the dates for these depositions. Hillary Clinton there, Bill Clinton, former Attorney General Merrick Garland, James Comey, former Attorney General Bill Barr, and you see the list goes on. Former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, Jeff Sessions, Bob Mueller, Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder. This is going to be a very, very busy late summer, early fall for the committee here. Kaylin, what are you hearing? What's the line of questioning going to be? These are a lot of high-ranking former law enforcement officials in the U.S. Oh, Kaylin, I think you might be muted there.
Yeah, I think the line of questioning is definitely going to be surrounding exactly what happened with the Epstein saga from the beginning to the end. There's going to obviously be an effort to paint a timeline that the American people can see that starts with the original 2000s case, ends with the Ghislaine Maxwell case that was prosecuted. But ultimately, as Nima said, there's going to be so many stopgaps in the way of these subpoenas to actually be enforced. And what's interesting is that we have this parallel probe happening with the Biden auto pen investigation. That's an investigation where the DOJ actually wants to get down to the bottom of it. They want to enforce the subpoenas where they can. And so there's a lot more coordination right now with the DOJ on that auto pen investigation. The DOJ, meanwhile, in the Epstein case, they've already spoken to Ghislaine Maxwell, as we know. We've already seen a report today from CNN that was later, I was able to get a source to confirm to us that there is an audio recording of the Ghislaine Maxwell interview with Todd Blanche. So the DOJ has already taken this huge step with the Ghislaine Maxwell interview, and that just seems like the House is spinning their wheels on this. But to the point, I think that they do want to show people where all of this originated, where it started to break down, why there was a non-prosecution agreement to begin with in the 2007 Epstein-related matter. And I think that that's essentially what they're trying to do, is put forth a good faith effort to show the American people that they care about this issue. But how much information they can get out of it really just seems like it's going to be futile.
Okay, you're alluding to the fact, maybe you're intimating at least, this is maybe just symbolic here. I mean, Nima, to you, what happens if some of these individuals don't show up for their deposition? They don't comply with the subpoena here. And were you wondering why some names were left out of that list from the committee? I'm wondering, why isn't former Labor Secretary Alex Acosta on that list?
Oh, no question. Alex Acosta should be the #1 person on that subpoena list. He's the one that has answers as to why that really unprecedented, unconscionable non-prosecution state disposition was offered when he was U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of Florida there in Miami. Those are people that actually have information about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. What about the FBI agents that actually worked on the case, or the assistant U.S. attorneys who presented the case to Acosta before he offered that deal to Jeffrey Epstein and my former law professor, Alan Dershowitz? Why aren't those people testifying? You know, obviously, look, there's a lot of rumors and innuendo out there involving the Clintons and Jeffrey Epstein. Again, I don't think they're going to show up, but, you know, I question why, you know, Alberto Gonzales, Loretta Lynch, Jeffrey Sessions, you know, folks like that have been subpoenaed. They're not going to show up. And even if they do, I don't know how much information they have. You know, Andrew, you and I and Kaylin and I have been talking about the Epstein case for years. If Congress really wanted to get to the bottom of it, they would get Alex Acosta there. They would subpoena the files from Pam Bondi and force her to turn them over, whether that Epstein list exists or not. Those are going to be much more fruitful sources of information. This leads me to believe that this is more political than anything. And the fact that, you know, Republicans and Democrats could finally get together to do anything on Capitol Hill is a minor miracle. But I don't think much will come of this. And then the question is Congress really going to try to hold these individuals in contempt when they don't show up and they don't testify and they don't produce documents? And even if they do, I don't think they're going to have much to add. So I don't understand why they're doing this and why they're not going to the direct sources of information here. Look, maybe Ghislaine Maxwell will provide something. I'm skeptical as far as that is concerned too, because if she really wants to shave time off her sentence, she needs to be talking to Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi, folks at the Department of Justice. Congress can't do anything, whether it's a pardon, whether it's a reduction. It's Congress. They have to go to the executive branch if Maxwell and their lawyers want some sort of reduction or even more, a pardon or commutation of her sentence.
Yeah, I mean, I question Congress's role in all of this. It seems like they want kind of a piece of the Epstein-Maxwell apple, so to speak. But you guys know it requires the extension of a lot of political capital to wage a subpoena fight, to your point, Nima. Let's move on, though, to some more of these other top headlines in this saga today. The DOJ, to your point, you've confirmed this, Kaylin, has an audio recording and a transcript of the interview it conducted with Ghislaine Maxwell last month that the administration is considering releasing publicly. Will we see that anytime soon, Kaylin? Have you asked for it?
Yeah, it's something that I asked about today. And while we were able to get the confirmation that it exists, it definitely seems like it's still in a state of flux, as some of the other administration officials were touting in the CNN report. It's still a debate right now about whether they want to release this. And I think that that's interesting that they find it to be something that is a matter that is still up in the air, because when you look at what Congress is doing, back to the point about how that seems like, how are we actually going to be able to see this sort of Brady Bunch of former, rumor, innuendo, Epstein associate and related government officials come together and talk about all of these things together? I think the Trump administration is thinking the best approach for this now is that we have a new recording that we can give to the American people that will at least satiate some of the questions that are lingering out there, because so many people wanted to know. There were so many teasers about that Todd Blanche interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, especially whenever her attorney came out and said that there were discussions of approximately around 100 people. Obviously, I think there was just mentions of names. It doesn't mean that those people that were discussed have any involvement in any of the alleged crimes that she was involved in. But I think that at the end of the day, people see that now as a new sort of golden egg token, so to speak, that they can glean further information from. And again, it was her best effort thus far to try to give off the appearance of a cooperation, and that could lean potentially in her favor if she's trying to seek shaving time off of her sentence.
There's a new piece in the USA Today newspaper that just dropped saying that Maxwell and her attorneys don't want this released. I would imagine that if it is released, a lot of it would be redacted, maybe names of those who have not been charged in any of the Epstein saga here. Nima, you and I, when we last spoke, I was asking you, and this was kind of impossible to determine at the time, but you said it was probably on the table, whether or not there was any quid pro quo, whether or not Maxwell got anything in return for these interviews over the course of 2 days with Todd Blanche here. Over the weekend, she was moved to a different correctional facility. Should we make the leap that that is something her lawyers put on the table and the DOJ, the Bureau of Prisons, accepted? Is it safe to make that leap or no?
It's absolutely possible. When it comes to inmate placement, it's entirely up to the Bureau of Prisons. And when you're talking about female inmates, there's not a whole lot of places, especially if they're serving significant time. So obviously she prefers to be in that minimum security camp with folks like Elizabeth Holmes, even though sex trafficking is considered a crime of violence and something that's dangerous. So I'm sure she and her lawyers are gunning for that type of placement. And the timing could be a coincidence, but color me skeptical. I think it was something that was probably negotiated. The question is, why hasn't she cooperated already? She's looking at 20 years. Maybe it's that Supreme Court appeal, and she's holding out hope that that Epstein plea agreement, which was a travesty that Acosta negotiated, somehow covers her. Well, the case law is pretty clear. And if you look at those plea agreements, it really only binds the district and the parties to that agreement. But she's arguing that somehow she should have been released from any criminal liability. I think if and when the Supreme Court rejects her appeal, and I believe the conference is going to be late September 29th, she is going to have that come to Jesus moment with her lawyers and say, if I don't cooperate, if I don't sing like a canary, start naming names, I'm going to spend probably close to the rest of my life in federal prison. So maybe that's what's happening here. And she should be really thinking about talking to Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi and trying to save herself instead of covering up for her former boyfriend who's now dead.
All right, I know we're going long, but just lastly, I have to get this in here because there's a separate track going on. The DOJ is now working its way through court to try to get grand jury testimony of some of these witnesses, victims to the crimes of both Epstein and Maxwell here. Well, the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, Jay Clayton, saying today in a letter to the court that most of the information contained in Maxwell grand jury transcripts was already made public at her trial. Kaylin, I had asked you that in the moment when that story broke, that the DOJ was pursuing these avenues in federal court to get that grand jury testimony released here. I'd asked you at the time, what more do we need to know? What didn't come out at trial? Jay Clayton is saying everything did. There's not much there.
Yeah, the only thing that seems to be new or could be new is the exhibits that were on display in the grand jury, which is a question that the DOJ has to decide by an August 8th deadline. That's this Friday, whether there is more information that they would like to put forth from those exhibits. But even still, the transcripts are where the most meat is going to be. And so what more really is there to offer at this point? I think that this is sort of becoming one of those elements that was dangled earlier on. But as we kind of knew from the get-go that there just wasn't going to be much to do, if anything, with the grand jury transcripts. But I think it was seen as something that the DOJ could at least offer out. But I think that, it gets back to the point that Nima and I have discussed for a long time, is that the DOJ is still sitting on a trove of information, especially with the FBI, that they could release. It doesn't have to come from the grand jury transcripts that are being offered. And furthermore, we're looking at sort of this fight that could potentially break out now, or at least, a tiff between the DOJ and Ghislaine Maxwell's counsel, because now she doesn't want any of that information to come out because she wasn't able to take a look at it prior to its release. And that seems to be where this is headed next, is now the judge there in New York has to make a decision about this consideration. And that all ties back to her Supreme Court appeal as well.
Finally, last thought, Nima, we've been covering this now for a month and a half, almost 2 months. Has anything new revealed itself about this story in that time frame?
Nothing new, but the timing of all this. I think it's all coming to a head. The Supreme Court appeal, really Maxwell's last gasp. And I think she's going to lose that. Then this congressional hearing. Apparently, there's some sort of negotiation where she wants immunity. She wants the questions in advance. So it leads me to believe that maybe she's actually considering it. Then, of course, the movement to a lower level prison. And of course, now these subpoenas. So maybe, just maybe, something is happening. What I think should happen is, and like Kaylin said, and Andrew, you and I have been talking about for months, the Department of Justice can release almost all this material unilaterally. The grand jury transcripts, of course, those are protected under Rule 6, but the rest of it, with a stroke of her pen, Pam Bondi can release. And I'm talking about the FBI interview notes. There are thousands and thousands of pages. Now, Congress can't compel her. The media can't compel her, but she can do it. So anything other than that is disingenuous and being less than honest with the American people. And will Maxwell finally start cooperating? I think the pressure is getting there. And maybe, just maybe, she'll realize that if she wants to save herself, she needs to start talking. And maybe that will just happen real soon.
All right. Nima Rahmani, Kaylin Deese, thanks for going along with us. There's a lot to get to. We'll definitely be speaking soon.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Kaylin. Talk soon.
Okay, in the meantime here, President Trump was asked about what we were just discussing. Yet again, he's asked about a lot of this stuff repeatedly at his public events. Remember, today, outside of the White House, he signed an executive order establishing a task force to be set up in the run-up to the 2028 Summer Olympics there in Los Angeles. We have a very brief soundbite. This is how the president responded to some of these Epstein-Maxwell questions today. Let's listen.
And do you believe that she is
It's not a very uncommon thing.
Do you believe that she's credible to be listening to? Your Deputy Attorney General sat down with her recently.
Well, let me tell you, he's a very talented man. His name is Todd Blanche. He's a very legitimate person, very high, just a very highly thought of person, respected by everybody. And I didn't talk to him about it, but I will tell you that whatever he asked would be totally appropriate, and it's not an uncommon thing to do that. And I think he probably wants to make sure that, people that should not be involved or aren't involved are not hurt by something that would be very, very unfortunate, very unfair to a lot of people. But I will say this, Todd Blanche is one of the most highly respected people you'll ever meet. So I know this. I didn't discuss it with him, but anything he talked about with her or the fact that he did that, not unusual, number one, and most importantly, is something that would be totally above board.